consultation with all other players, pupils, parents, and other stakeholders to refine our change path and make sure that it becomes a reality while paying attention to the impact and to the way we may mobilize teachers for such exercise. We need, of course, to improve their working conditions, their training, but also their material or financial situation in a structural approach that can be considered more as an investment than a mere increase of an operational budget. A complementary question: how can we steer all this? Do you see it as a centralized effort, state-led or not, implementing by objectives, or through a more detailed formulation? The approach that we prefer is a follow-up mechanism, which is a societal project that involves all actors, the government, the civil society, economic operators. The convergence of all these players is an important subject, and also with assessment stages to see what is working and what is not. And His Majesty the King has entrusted this follow-up mission of the implementation of this reference framework to the High Commissioner for Planning, and the implementation of this structure that is underway has allowed us to create these conditions of convergence geared towards the objective with a clear implementation capacity. And here I would like to talk about the macroeconomic framework, which is not an and per se, but also a lever and a framework that allows us to accompany and achieve this ambition. Of course, we need to mobilize internal resources, external resources, international resources, and diversify all these resources, and also accept that there can be some imbalances when achieving this transformation towards more growth and more inclusive growth with delivery capacity, proven delivery capacity. And this is also the opportunity to stress the importance of assistance by international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank, of high significance to accompany this dynamic and to contribute to the success of such dynamic. Now, the third aspect, which is the role of the private sector, a very important partner indeed, and we will also come back on the industrial policy that Ricardo mentioned earlier. But before we go to this third part, Ricardo, let's talk about the region. You have accompanied several countries in their transformation projects. You have touched very closely different experiences. Some were successes and others not. Are there any elements that differentiate regions when it comes to achieving such a transformation process?
Is very hard to achieve anywhere in Middle East, North Africa, and elsewhere in the world is a cooperative relationship between government and the private sector. There is enormous complementarities between what the private sector can do and what the private sector needs from the government. There are markets for cars, and you can have a market for car and freedom of car, pricing, etc. But no one wants to buy a car if there are no roads, if there are no traffic signs, if there are no traffic lights, if there are no traffic rules, if there are no traffic cops. Every industry lives in a space of public goods. Now it's very hard to sell an electric vehicle because people wonder, if I run out of battery, well, where am I going to charge the car? And nobody wants to put charging stations because nobody owns an electric car. So you have these chicken and egg problems everywhere, and you have to have a framework where there is enough communication between a private sector that sees opportunities, a private sector that suffers obstacles, and a government that is able to adopt, adjust its policies, its infrastructure, its rules to facilitate the exploitation of those opportunities. And that's very hard to achieve. There's, in some countries, there's big distrust of the private sector. There are some parts of government that want to keep control of parts of the economy. In other parts, there's just inability to put society to deal with its issues. You come from Lebanon. We understand that it's been 4 years, an inability to address a major crisis to get yourself together. So I would emphasize the fact that Morocco has a vision of where it wants to go that can facilitate the coordination of reforms in many areas. It's predicated on a relatively healthy political process that is in general, relatively hard to achieve.
Thank you very much. Let me move to the third set of issues, the role of the private sector. Minister Jaskowska, how a country who has been in a centralized communist regime for more than 5-6 decades was able to transform very quickly in a vibrant private sector-led economy? Is it a DNA shift or something that has been done that you would like to share with us?
Yes, thank you. I think that we have, despite the communist centralized system we had, and Poles, they had in their DNA this entrepreneurship gene. So at the very beginning, when the market, Polish market, became an open one, and we had these reforms, really there was a boom of the private initiatives, private businesses, and this boom really continues. And in Poland, the majority of the businesses, and our economy is based mostly on the small and medium enterprises, and. What was necessary, of course, was to build a business-friendly environment. And it is not the job which has been done and it's over, because it's usually on the way the governments, they tend to be over-bureaucratic and to over-regulate the environment for the businesses. So the constant dialogue is very, very important. What you said, this is the dialogue, the conversation, the contact, which allows to understand what are the needs, what are the obstacles, and what can be done from the government side. What we needed to do, we need to build the whole infrastructure for businesses, for investments, and to understand that this is really necessary to allow businesses to grow, and so the infrastructure, the investment in the human development, so the education, which is really important. And you need to do this with the businesses, because you need to know if you really need these watchmakers or you need a highly skilled professionals on the ICT sector or others, and what is the industry direction, and also the diversification of the economy. And in Poland it really did happen, because we have also, okay, we have the industry, but we have a lot of, as I said, small and medium enterprises. We have a lot of services, hubs for very innovative services for the global companies. And this diversification and also the strong macroeconomic fundamentals and the let's say, the flexibility of the businesses, it really helped us to survive the recent crises. Not only the COVID-19, of course, with the support, with the transfers from the state to keep the companies going, not to have the increase of unemployment, but also during the war, which is at our borders. It's really this flexibility, this competitiveness of Polish companies is really something which helps to survive these really difficult times. But this all was a process of transformation, of building a trust between government, institutions and businesses, of building the business-friendly environment. And as I said, this process is not over yet. And a lot is to be done, because we are living not only in Poland with the Polish regulator, we also live in the European Union with the EU regulator. And there is a voice, very strong voice in EU, but also in Poland, for the simpler regulation, for creating more competitive environment, because we have all the trends in the global economy, like fragmentation, like the protectionism and others, and there is a discussion, but we need really to make our businesses, to make the environment more competitive for businesses, and the economies will grow.
Thank you very much. Ricardo, let me move fast. The IP issue, the industrial policy issue, those shifts in policies. Do you see this as justified, giving the circumstances of, I would say, growing feeling of...
Unfortunately, we can't hear the speaker. The sound is interrupted.
Down. And how you differentiate between the two, and how we as economists...
We can't hear the speaker properly. There is a staccato in output.
A government is several thousand agencies and several million pages of legislation. So you're managing thousands of agencies and millions of pages of legislation. Nobody has read the million pages of legislation. And nobody knows what all the thousands of government agencies are doing. So you need a system to figure out where you need to edit the million pages of legislation and where you need to reorganize or reorder your thousands of government agencies. And you're going to do it with some kind of goal or purpose, some kind of problem-solving capacity. And in my mind, those problems do not exist at the horizontal level only. There are many problems that are vertical, that are industry-specific. And you have to be able to have conversations at the right level of specificity. Some issues are quite horizontal. Ideally, you want to find problems that are horizontal. And if you solve them, you solve the problem for many industries. But some problems are vertical. And if you want to have your agricultural sector export, you will have to solve sanitary and phytosanitary problems, certifications, market access, etc. And you'll have to do it for that industry. There is one thing, when things work, you don't know why they work. And when things don't work, you don't know why they don't work. I don't know why Poland works, okay? But let me put you a couple of hypotheses, okay? The first one is that it was artificially separated from the rest of Europe, and suddenly you realize that Poland is incredibly close to Germany. And as a consequence, you have this labor force that used to have a much lower wage rate than German wage rates. The moment you allow investment and trade to happen, many companies moved east to establish in Poland. And by the way, they moved more to Western Poland than to Eastern Poland. Okay? So proximity to markets, etc., is definitely a good thing, and the European Union opened those markets. But the European Union did something else too, that it took away the power of Poland to prevent Germans or Belgians or Italians or whoever to work in Poland. That means that if there were skills shortages in Poland, it doesn't matter, because you could mobilize skills from anywhere in the continent and send them to Poland. In most developing countries, including, for example, in this region, immigration policies are incredibly restrictive. In Jordan, you have to be a citizen to be a doctor. You have to be a citizen to be an engineer. So if you have some skills shortage, you cannot solve it by just bringing talent from abroad. Immigration policy, in my mind, is probably the cheapest development strategy, development reform that you could do. It generates money, it doesn't cost any money, and it's horizontal. But not all solutions are horizontal. You have to have a government that has the capacity to do the horizontal when there are opportunities, and doing the vertical when there are opportunities. And that vertical is what I want to call industrial policy. I don't want to call industrial policy a set of subsidies, a set of protections. That's not the goal. In my mind, industrial policy should be defined by its goal. And its goal has to be diversification in the direction of greater complexity. That's its goal. Its instruments are going to be opportunistic. They're going to be about solving the need for public goods, the need for solving chicken and egg problems in the appearance of the new. And I think that that's how I think of industrial policy. And in that sense, governments have always done it, but they're always there, but everything that can be done should be done better. And there's many ways in which this thing can be improved.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, but I would like to give the last word for you, Minister Ben Moussa, to conclude the session.
Juste un mot pour souligner.
Just a word to stress how important is the assistance by international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank. This assistance and coaching of this transformation process. The needs for finance are extremely important, given all the stakes and challenges we have mentioned. We have existing solutions, but we also need innovative solutions. How do we create convergence between all stakeholders and players so that they may accompany the choices and the objectives and ambition of each country? How a continent like Africa, with its own realities and its own stakes, there are adaptations that need to be clear when it comes to the objective, but also as to the path to go forward to that transformation. Thank you. This is very interesting. We are going to shift now to the next session, which will be moderated by, and the moderator is appearing on the stage.
Hello? Hello, hello? Oui. So thanks a lot. There's going to be a video, and then session 3 chaired by His Excellency Minister Jazuli and moderated by Dr. Gaffi. So wait a few seconds for session 3 of this event. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming event will start in 5 minutes. Please take your seats and switch your phones to silent mode.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will start in about 5 minutes. We ask you to sit in your seats and also to silence your mobile phones.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists.
Would you like to be president of Nigeria?
Some of us, we need to lead in terms of the trajectory of developing Africa through the business, not through the political leadership.
Are there good investment opportunities for non-Africans in Africa?
Well, there are good opportunities for everybody, you know, and I think there's protection also for everybody.
So the Arsenal team, is that a team that you would like to buy someday?
It is a team that, yes, you know, I would like to buy, you know, someday.
Would you fix your tie, please?
Well, people wouldn't recognize me if my tie was fixed, but okay. Just leave it this way. All right. I don't consider myself a journalist, and nobody else would consider myself a journalist. I began to take on the life of being an interviewer, even though I have a day job of running a private equity firm. How do you define leadership? What is it that makes somebody tick? Aliko Dangote is widely known to be the wealthiest man in Africa. So is that a title you're proud to have, or is that one where you get so many people calling you for money, you wish you weren't the wealthiest man in Africa?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, David. It's great to be here, you know, and also seeing you today. Well, you know, when they call you the wealthiest person in Africa, you know, it comes with a lot of baggage. Of course, there are so many demands here and there, where people now come up with so many different, you know, demands. But it is good because I'd like to give back to the society.
So right now you are involved in many philanthropic endeavors in Africa and elsewhere. Let's go through some of them before we go to how you actually made all of this money. So recently you had an event in New York, where we are now, with Mo Ibrahim, also a wealthy African business person, and Bill Gates, in which you provided a fair amount of money for the African Center in New York, in Harlem. What is the African Center, and why did you do that?
Well, we did the Africa Center idea started with, you know, Chelsea, Clinton, Hadil, Mo Ibrahim, and my daughter Halima. My daughter Halima joined them later, and we realized that, look, we need to set up this Africa Center. We need to make it you know, a reality. First of all, you know, for us to be able to project Africa in a better light, you know, bringing Africa to the rest of the world. You know, especially when you look at, you know, the 3rd week of every September, we have the United Nations General Assembly, where the entire world converges in New York. And what we want to do is to tell the real narrative of Africa and tell the rest of the world what Africa is all about. So this is now to do with policy, business, and culture. You know, because sometimes, you know, I mean, especially, you know, Americans, they don't really understand much about Africa. You know, somebody will say, okay, well, both you Africans, you know, what kind of language do you speak? For example, in Africa, we speak about 2,000 different languages.
Well, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
So right now, one of the big problems in Africa is health, and you've been very involved in trying to eradicate polio in Nigeria, along with Bill Gates and his foundation. What is the progress that you've made to date?
I think we've done quite a lot. You know, the progress has been very, very tremendous. In the last 3 years, we haven't really had any wild, you know, virus of polio. And hopefully, when we work hard between now and the next 6 months, by April, we'll be certified to be polio-free country, which means the entire African continent will be polio-free.
Now, one of the things you're doing in the philanthropic world is building a hospital in Nigeria. Why do you feel a need to build a new hospital?
I think we need to build a world-class hospital, because when you look at it, in Nigeria, we spend quite a lot of money, where a lot of people go abroad for medical checkup, for medical operation. Then what we are trying to do is to give that hope to the population and say that, look, you don't need travel abroad. We will be able to treat you there.
Now, for those who may not be familiar with Africa, Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, is that right?
It is.
And it's growing at a very large rate in terms of its population, is that?
Yeah, about 3%. Yeah, we're growing at about 3%.
So if at the current rate, at some point, more people will be in Nigeria than in the United States.
Well, by 2050, will be at about 450 million population, and I'm sure we will be way ahead of the States. We'll be about number 3 after China, India, and then it will be Nigeria in terms of population.
So by 2050, you could be the 3rd biggest country in the world by population, at the current population growth rate. So does that make you nervous about whether Nigeria can house and feed all these people?
It doesn't really make me nervous because we have massive arable land, we have a lot of water, we have you know, the right climate. So when you look at it, the major contributor to our GDP in Nigeria is agriculture. So I think we just need to tilt a bit and change from the normal oil, you know, reliant economy to agriculture and manufacturing.
So Nigeria is known as well for having large oil deposits. Is that a major contributor to the Nigerian economy? Is that the major source of wealth in Nigeria?
It's not the major source, but it contributes 90% of the foreign exchange, you know, that, you know, we have. And we also, the 60% of the government's revenue is also coming from oil. But I think the government is doing quite a lot to try and diversify the economy by trying to structure their own taxes, because we need to make more money from the taxes. The taxes, you know, generation in Nigeria is a bit low. So I think government is working very hard to make sure that, yes, they adjust all these numbers.
Now, as the wealthiest man in Africa and the wealthiest man in Nigeria, do you get pressure to run for political office yourself? Would you like to be president of Nigeria?
I think I'm doing a great job where I'm right now, so I don't think I need to be in a political space. Some of us, we need to lead in terms of the trajectory of developing Africa through the business, not through the political leadership.
Let's talk about how you made this amount of money, which is by far the largest amount of money that any individual has in Africa. So you came from a wealthy family or not a wealthy family?
I came from a wealthy family. My late great-grandfather in the 1940s was actually the richest, you know, West African. My late grandfather was one of the wealthiest Nigerian. You know, the family name is Dentata. That's from my maternal side. My father too, you know, was fairly rich, you know, but he was both, you know, in business and also in politics. But you know, David, one thing that I'm very, very proud of is that I did not inherit any money from my father. I built everything from scratch to where I am.
So your father died when you were relatively young?
Yeah, he died when I was 8 years old.
So he didn't leave in his will a large amount of money for you?
Well, he left in the will, but, you know, I mean, whatever that I inherited from him, which means in assets, I gave that one to charity since then.
Okay, so did you go to college in Nigeria?
No, I went in Egypt.
Egypt, all right. And what did you study?
Business.
All right, so you graduated at what age?
I graduated at about 20 years old.
All right, so you went back from Egypt to Nigeria?
Yes, I went back, and then
what did you get a job? What did you do?
I started work with my, you know, uncle, but there's few months, and then I went to Lagos, and now I started my own business by just, you know, buying cement, selling. You know, it was just a very low-key business.
All right, so you're 20, 21 years old, you're buying cement, you're a trader. You're not,
I was trading, yes.
You're not making cement, you're trading it.
I was trading at that time.
Now, cement is your main business. We'll talk about it in a moment, but why is cement such a big part of Africa's, you know, wealth, at least in Nigeria?
Well, the issue is that when you look at cement, cement is what builds infrastructure. And we need a lot of infrastructural deficit. In Nigeria alone, we have about 17,000 deficit of housing. And it is all over in, you know, Africa. So when we started cement in Nigeria, we realized that majority of it was actually imported. And that is why we went in there, we started, and it's a long story.
So you ultimately were trading cement, and then was it hard to get the money to keep that business going?
No, it wasn't really hard. At that time, I was buying domestically. We started importation in 1980 because I started business in 78. So by 1980, we started importing sugar, rice, commodities generally. And then we stopped the cement business because the cement I was actually doing local trading. It wasn't really import business. We started import of cement in 2000.
Okay, so you had a cement trading business. Somebody thought Lafarge may be buying it. You decided not to sell because they wanted control. And you then decided to build your own cement manufacturing business, is that right?
Yes, I decided in 2003 to build my own cement. That time, Nigeria was only producing about 1.8, 1.9 million tons. But we went ahead and started with 5 million tons of cement capacity.
So what year was that?
This was 2000, and we started the building end of 2003, and we finished in 2007.
And so now you're the largest cement manufacturer in Nigeria?
We are the largest cement manufacturer in sub-Saharan Africa.
So you're building a refinery in Nigeria. Why does Nigeria need another refinery?
When you look at the entire sub-Saharan Africa, we have only 2 working refineries.
So the cement business is the core of your wealth and your company, but you're now building other things. So you're building a refinery in Nigeria. Why does Nigeria need another refinery?
Well, David, let me give you a little bit of history. What we do as Dangote Group, we use our businesses, like now we're using our current businesses to build the future of the, business. Like when we're in sugar, it was the sugar profit that we use in building the cement. Now with the cement, we're building so many things, refinery, fertilizer, petroleum products, and then we're doing also petrochemicals. With the refinery, your question is, okay, why are we building a refinery? When you look at the entire sub-Saharan Africa, we have only 2 working refineries. One, it is in Cote d'Ivoire, which has only 75,000 barrels a day. The other one is by Sasol in South Africa. But majority of all these countries, almost all the sub-Saharan African countries, they don't have refining capacity. So all of them, they export their oil, but they import products. So we realize that majority of the foreign exchange spendings of Nigeria goes to petroleum products imports.
So Nigeria is exporting its oil and then it has to buy refined oil products back, import it, right?
Yes.
And what you're doing is you're building one of the largest refineries in the world?
It is the largest single line in the world. It's 650,000 barrels a day.
Sorry, 650,000 barrels a day of refining capacity. So to do that, do you have to borrow some money, or where did the money come from to build that?
Well, what we are doing right now, we are borrowing from the commercial banks. We are also borrowing some money from, some financial institutions like the, African Development Bank, the development banks, financial development, banks. We are borrowing from, African Exim Bank.
So many companies outside outside of Africa would like to invest in Africa. Where do you recommend that they invest? In Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya? Obviously you're probably partial to Nigeria, but are there good investment opportunities for non-Africans in Africa?
Well, there are good opportunities for everybody, and I think there's protection also for everybody. As we speak today, even foreign investors. Let me give you an example. In Nigeria, if I have a partnership with you that I'm investing, I won't have what you call minimum taxation. But if the company is owned by myself alone, as a Nigerian or Nigerian entity, we have a minimum taxation. So there's quite a lot in terms of inviting foreigners to come and invest in Africa. But countries that I can suggest for people to invest, one of them, of course, Nigeria. Ghana is a very good place to invest. Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya. Kenya is also a very good place to invest.
Now, I first met you a number of years ago when I was raising my firm's African investment fund, and you invested in it. And today, the bloom seems to be off the rose in African private equity investing. It was very attractive to many people 4, 5, 6 years ago. Today, it seems to be less attractive. Is that because the economies in Africa have gone down a bit, or what would you say is the reason?
Well, I think most of that reason, I think, is to do of, first of all, lack of understanding of where to even invest. I mean, look at the investment that were made with you. I think I can say that 90% of whatever we invested in, we are doing very well. So I think it is where you should invest. Even myself as an African, I cannot invest in every single sector. So I have to be very choosy of where I invest. And, there's a lot of, wrong perception. People read stories from newspapers and they believe what they are, reading. But I think, as we go along, there are quite a lot of changes in most African countries to try and change in terms of, focus on the economy.
Now, you live principally in Lagos, is that right?
Yes, I do.
And how many people are there in Lagos?
In Lagos today, we have about 25 million. 25 million people? Yes, in terms of population. I know it's a very small...
So getting around in Lagos, which I've tried to do, is not that easy, though getting around in New York's not that easy either. But for example, when you get around, do you have like special police cars that take you around? How do you get around Lagos?
Well, I get around in Lagos, yeah, sometimes I have, police escort, but not all the time. Okay. Over the weekend, I drive myself.
You drive yourself?
Oh, yes, I do. I drive myself.
And people stare at you and say, there's the wealthiest man in Africa driving himself?
They do sometimes when they recognize, the person driving, yes.
So do you go to a restaurant by yourself? Do people come up for selfies or they ask you for money?
They don't really ask me for money, but even here, anytime when I go to places, to either eat or to, I get a lot of requests for selfies, for, yes, it's normal.
Now, you have some outside interests. One of them, I think you're interested in what we call in the United States soccer, but other people call football. So the Arsenal team, and is that a team that you would like to buy someday?
It is a team that, yes, I would like to buy, someday. But like what I keep saying today, we have $20 billion worth of projects. And I think that's really what I want to concentrate on. I'm trying to finish building the company, and then after we finish, maybe sometime in 2021, we can...
So you're not buying a team right now?
I'm not buying us right now. I'm buying us the next level.
What are the attributes that you think you have brought to the table which make you successful?
I think the most important one, number one, David, if you are going into any business, you must understand the business A to Z. You must know that business.
Okay, so in terms of Africa itself, generally, are you bullish on Africa's prospects as a place in which people can invest, private equity firms or industrial companies to invest?
I think I'm very, very bullish when it comes to Africa, and it is the main reason, David, today why we have $20 billion that we're investing all, at a go, which will finish by end of next year, first quarter of, in the next 2 years, let's say in the next 2 years. I'm very, very bullish, in Africa. We have done very, very well in, Africa. And, I can tell you, if we continue with what we are doing today, based on our own projections, we will be able to be, within the next 5 years in the Fortune 100.
Now, from time to time on some television networks, I see advertisements for Dangote.
Yes.
For your company. Is that just general brand building? Why do you advertise, let's say in the United States, the Dangote brand, because most of your businesses are not in the United States?
Well, it's a brand building, and like what we have planned to do, we are not going to remain dominant only in Africa. We are going to invest outside Africa. Because what we are doing right now, David, we are investing, yes, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa. But if you look at what we are building today, we have a company that has revenues of $4 billion. In the next 2 years, we will have a company that will have a revenue of about $30 billion. So with that, we'll have quite a lot of money. What we are trying to do is to use major part of that money and invest outside Africa, and maybe 40% of it to continue to invest in Africa, because we have invested very, very heavily in Africa.
So you're in your early 60s.
Yeah, I'm 62 now.
62, well, that's pretty early 60s. So do you intend to keep doing this for 10 more years, 20 more years, 30 more years?
Let me not commit, but I think I will maybe work for the next, at least, very active in the next 15 years.
So let's suppose somebody's watching this and say, I want to be like Mr. Dangote, I want to be a successful businessman in Africa. What are the attributes, or anywhere, what are the attributes that you think you have brought to the table which make you successful? Is it intelligence, hard work, persistence, all of those things? What would you say are the most important attributes?
I think the most important one, number one, David, if you are going into any business, you must understand the business A to Z. You must know that business. You shouldn't just go and invest because somebody now will say, okay, hey, there's good money in cement, then you go and jump into cement. You have to understand the business in and out, and that's the difference with me. I know my business in and out. You can wake me up any time and ask me about fertilizer, ask me about anything that we are doing. And the other one is really to work very hard, and you have to have the tenacity of continuing to, you have some hiccups here and there, but you have to be focused in terms of what you are doing.
Now, I've known you for a while, and I never seem to get you to yell or scream, or you seem very low-key. You don't use the technique of yelling and screaming at people, or you're just very low-key and even-keeled. To what do you attribute that, or am I wrong?
I think, no, you're not wrong. That's my nature. I'm very quiet, and I'm very, very calm. I get upset sometimes when people try to be, either to outsmart me, or I don't like people who will not tell me the truth. I always like people to look at me through, and tell me the truth.
So are you investing any in the United States?
We are going to start investing, in the United States just after this project. We want to open a family office, both in New York and in London. We already have an office in London which has been operating for the last 30 years.
Okay.
So we want to turn part of that, as a family office, so that we can diversify the wealth. As you know, I've discussed this with you before, where, sometimes in Africa you have issues of devaluation, so we want to really preserve some of the family's wealth.
Right. Now, sometimes wealthy people, they collect art, they collect cars, they collect other things, or some of your wealth that you're not using for philanthropy, what do you do with it? Are you a collector of things, or?
I'm not really a collector of arts. Anytime when I have excess money, I like to put more in terms of charity. I don't really have very expensive lifestyle.
And the great pleasure of your life is just building your company and then giving away extra money?
That's my greatest pleasure in life.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it's a very good success story, and I know a lot of people wanted to hear how you've done it, and I guess you're saying it's hard work and persistence, a little luck maybe from time to time.
Luck, definitely. Luck must be there. If there's no luck, you won't be able to make it, of course.
Well, thank you very much for coming today, and I appreciate your giving us your insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies, and three-time mayor of New York City, Michael R. Bloomberg.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is a happy occasion that we've had a good conference, and we're all going to go home knowing what we have to do, but I will have to put a little bit of a downer in at this point. If you haven't read the news today, there were enormous flash floods in Vancouver, basically cut it off from the rest of Canada, and the enormous amount of damage, and I don't know how many what the casualty count was, but it just tells us that the climate change is real, and the storms are getting more frequent, the storms are getting stronger, and we've got to do something about it. And that's what this conference is all about, and you are the solution to the problem. I think it's fair to say that this kind of disaster really does underscore the importance of what we're doing here. As we start the forum's final day, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has participated and helped us make it so productive, and also a sincere thank you to our hosts here in Singapore. The Prime Minister and his team were greatly supportive every step of the way, and we appreciate their partnership and the backdrop here of every day you would look in the newspaper, watch television, listen on the radio, go on the net, and find more cases coming up and it going down. And so for the last couple of months, we've been living on tenterhooks, but they have done a lot to get control over the virus, and they've been able to accommodate us, and for that we're deeply appreciative, and hopefully it will lead to more people being able to go out and go back to a normal life. Coming out of COP26, the opportunity that we had was to build on some recent momentum, bringing the public and private sectors even closer together and finding common ground on economic issues facing both the East and the West alike. And I think it's fair to say that we have succeeded to some extent. Amid all of the challenges we face, I think there's every reason to be more optimistic than ever. This forum is a major reason why, but that certainly doesn't say we don't have a challenge ahead. It's just that I think now we see a little bit better what that challenge is and can plan on tackling it. This is how we build bridges and accelerate breakthroughs in every part of life, and we're going to get this done. Now, as you know, since its inception back in 2018, the Bloomberg New Economy Forum has taken place in Asia and built bridges between East and West. The countries here will play a leading role in making or breaking the climate agenda, and dynamic Asian economies are at the forefront of new technologies and innovations. But we believe the time is now to broaden our conversations, and to help us do that, we have an exciting announcement today on issues ranging from trade and investment to the future of cities, public health, and migration. Latin America's influence and importance on the global stage is continuing to grow. The pandemic has left deep scars on many countries in the region, but businesses can play a major role in helping to get growth back on track, to reverse the rise of poverty, and to spread opportunity more broadly and widely. So I'm glad to say that we are extending the Bloomberg New Economy Forum by launching the Gateway series of regionally focused convenings, which will be our first time outside of Asia, and the first will spotlight Latin America, and it will take place in the spring of 2020 in Panama. And I want to thank Panama's President, Laurentino Cortizo. I was honored to meet him in New York recently, and his administration has been tremendously helpful in developing our next event together. So let me also acknowledge the ministers from Panama who are with us today. Thank you for their leadership. Jose Rojas Pardini, Minister of Private Investment, and Ramon Martinez de la Guardia, Minister of Commerce and Industry. Our event in Panama will be the first of our new regionally focused Gateways convenings, and this will lead up to the annual Bloomberg New Economy Forum, which takes place in November each year. We will have more details as where that's going to be and what we're going to do. We'll have that soon, and we hope our meeting in Panama will bring together decision makers from across government and businesses and stimulate sustainable investments and free trade around the world from that part of the globe. And this is a big globe, and what you have to keep reminding yourself is, if you do one little thing to improve the environment, everybody in the world benefits. If, however, you do one little thing that damages the environment, exactly the reverse is true. This is a worldwide, global problem, and you can't separate anybody out from it. First, in getting done, we have another interesting program planned for today. One key result of the UN Climate Summit this month was an unexpected agreement between the US and China. Our next speaker can perhaps tell us what all that means. we're going to have an opportunity to hear from America's climate envoy, John Kerry. He and his team and his Chinese counterparts both deserve credit for reaching an agreement between our countries, which really is a hopeful step. So that's making progress, no question about it. It shows the power of collaboration and that this conference is what this conference is all about. And as we appreciate John taking the time to share his perspective with us, we have to, I think, thank him somewhat for spending his life trying to make the world a better place. So John, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. It's been positive and a productive week, and we still have much to do together, but having you here on the final day, John, really makes a difference. And I'm looking forward to seeing our work here at the forum pay dividends in the year ahead. So thank you. We will see you all back in 2022, and all the best. Enjoy, learn, and take it home with you. Thank you.
Welcome to the stage, Bloomberg Senior Executive Editor and Head of Bloomberg Economics, Stephanie Flanders, and U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry.
Well, I always appreciate getting the warm-up act from the boss. Thanks, everyone, for being here early, but you have a very good reason to be here early. As Mike said, it's a special treat to have John Kerry here, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, former Senator, former Secretary of State. And I appreciate, John Kerry, that you've also run from a White House meeting in order to be here at the end of your day. Mike mentioned one of the, I guess, relatively few positive surprises out of the Glasgow summit was the US-China joint Glasgow Declaration on Climate. Enormous symbolic significance. Clearly, there haven't been a lot of joint US-China anything for a while. But what practical difference, when we look at the words in that document, what practical difference are they going to make to the battle to contain climate change?
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much. A great question, and I look forward to answering it. But let me just first, if I may, say good morning to everybody, and thank you very much, Mike Bloomberg, who personifies global citizenship and activism at its best. And we're all deeply grateful to Mike for the leadership he has offered on the retirement of coal plants in the United States and efforts elsewhere. And I think everybody here knows that he's just been terrific in helping to galvanize people all around the world. So I'm very happy to be part of one of his important fora around the world. Stephanie, the China agreement is in fact, I think, significant. And I'm not saying that because I negotiated it with Xi Jinping, who is a longtime associate and friend. He and I know each other quite well over 20 plus years. And we've worked at this issue. The agreement is 5 pages that lay out our cooperative effort, not just on methane and CO2, but also on deforestation, and the creation of a working group between our two countries, which we are now immediately going to begin to activate. And it is that working group, with the help of experts who are going to come to the table, both from China and the United States and conceivably elsewhere, who will help, hopefully, to change the capacity for dissent or for debate with respect to the choices that we need to make. And I hope that our working together will increase the sharing of data, increase the sharing of options, and begin to engage us in a very important dialogue with the top leadership of both of our countries. and that's our hope. But importantly, the agreement is quite specific in addressing methane with a specific date for action. We agreed to work together in the effort to share information and to work on creating a national action plan. We have accepted the notion which President Biden put forward in Glasgow, together with President von der Leyen of the EU, of a methane pledge. And the pledge is that we will reduce methane by 30% on a global basis, which doesn't mean any individual country is doing the 30%, but in contributed global aggregation, we will get a 30% reduction on a global basis. And China agreed to work with us to lay out an ambitious, these are the words, ambitious national action plan, which China must submit and begin acting on by COP27, a year from now in Sharm el-Sheikh. The second thing that it did was set forth a rationale for the creation of the work group and the joint agreement, which is the acceleration of the reduction of emissions, with China agreeing that that could lead to specific targets, specific programs, specific policies, specific agreement on goals between us or for themselves. So if we were to do the 30% reduction of methane on a global basis by 2030, as Fatih Birol of the IEA has made clear to us, that is the equivalent of taking all the cars of the world, all the trucks of the world, all the ships of the world, all the planes of the world to zero emissions by 2030. So you can get a sense of the enormity of what the reduction of methane can mean. It's about a 0.2 degree reduction in the rise of the Earth's temperature. And it's the single biggest, fastest grab that we can make for dealing with this problem. The third thing that the agreement does is sets a date currently for when China, in the commencement of its 15th five-year plan at 2026, begins to phase down the consumption of coal, and does so with an agreement with us that together we will work to make best efforts to accelerate the reduction, the phase out of coal. So there are three big sort of components of this, but paragraph 6 of the second page of the document lays out this goal of accelerating and an acceptance of the idea that our working together does result in the accelerating of the reduction of CO2 as well as methane. So look, all of what we do in Glasgow or did in Glasgow obviously results in words reduced to paper, but that is what brought us to Glasgow. That is what resulted in the submission of 191 national determined contributions, or NDCs, the reduction of emissions. It's the words translated into actions that actually resulted in our committing to additional funds, a doubling of the amount of money that goes into adaptation, a significant recognition of the challenge of loss and damages, with a beginning of a dialogue that will take place over the next year to figure out how we deal with that. It has very ambitious increase of ambition among particularly 65% of global GDP. And that 65% of global GDP is now committed to real reductions over the next 10 years, not a 2050 net zero target, but a target between the 2020 and 2030 will see a 50 to 52% reduction of emissions in the United States, 55% in Europe, 68% in the UK, 45 to 50% in Japan and Canada and South Korea. So we, in addition to that, secured major commitments from India with a 450 gigawatt deployment of renewables, Saudi Arabia, 50% deployment of renewables in the next 10 years, Africa, South Africa, committing not only to a 1.5-degree track, but to begin to phase out coal with the help of the developed world. Likewise for Indonesia, which raised its reduction levels to 50% in all, 25% from the forests, and from stopping deforestation and increasing the sink, and also about a 25% reduction in coal-fired emissions. So things are happening, and the bottom line is we're all going to have to work overtime. The collaboration demand of the world in order to achieve our goals could not be higher or more important, and that's why these kinds of conferences are themselves so critical to us now.
You mentioned the sums for adaptation and mitigation for the developing countries. That was one aspect of this agreement that certainly fell short, and for many who were there through all of the negotiations, left a kind of bitter taste in their mouths, because it felt that it seemed to many that very little progress had been made in really offering developing countries a path to develop as well as be part of this climate action. Do you understand those who felt disappointed by what came out of it, the lack of actual money on the loss and damage, and the failure to even meet the $100 billion target, which you've admitted is nothing in the scheme of things of what's going to be needed?
Well, look, let me be more, Stephanie, I'm glad you asked the question, because I really want to tackle that. You know, the $100 billion was a goal. It's become a target, but it was a goal. It was pulled out of the air by Gordon Brown, I think in Copenhagen, where they were trying to find agreement, and they decided there'd be $100 billion. We accepted that in Paris when we negotiated it. But as I said, it was the goal of $100 billion. And the way the money is counted is frankly not very efficient, because there's a lot of money we can mobilize and have mobilized, but it doesn't get counted towards what we're doing. When I took this job on, we were at $67 billion for the year 2022, excuse me. And that's the first year the Biden administration could step up, folks. A guy named Donald Trump cut all the funding, and a guy named Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement. And so when Joe Biden became president, the first budget he has in front of him is the budget we're working on right now. And we put $11.4 billion into that, doubling that Joe Biden had engaged in, even as we're trying to get our own country back on track and do the things we need to do to get the job done. We've accepted a 50% to 52% reduction. We are legitimately on track to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And I personally wish that more energy was spent focusing on some of the countries that didn't submit NDCs, and big countries, and focusing on the countries that are not on a 1.5 track, but indeed are going to be, putting more emissions into the atmosphere over the course of the next number of years. So the reality is we got up to 95 to 97 billion according to the OECD for next year. And if we can complete the budget that we have coming in, then we'll be over the 100 billion for next year. In addition, we are definitely, according to the OECD, over 100 billion for the year after that, and for the year after that. So we are making good in the first year that we have an opportunity to do something with the budget. In addition, loss and damage has not even been accepted as a major part of the agreement, but we accepted the idea that it is important to deal with, and that we do have to have a dialogue how we begin to deal with this. But look, if we don't want to shut the entire United States Congress down on putting money into climate, we can't accept the opening of the liability, which is going to tie up the courts and the structure and not get the money we need for adaptation and resilience. So we really ought to be putting more effort into adaptation and resilience, where we are doubling the money. In fact, President Biden quadrupled the amount of money that we're putting in, and we willingly accepted the idea of going from 20 billion to 40 billion out of the 100 billion that will be there for next year. But the bigger issue, folks, is not $100 billion. That's peanuts compared to what we have to be doing here. And the fact is that we went to the top banks in the United States. I personally engaged with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of America. And those 6 banks have committed that over the next 10 years, they're prepared and will invest $4.16 trillion in this transition. In addition, Larry Fink at BlackRock says he's going to put at least $1 trillion in, and others will. And there's a global finance alliance, which Mark Carney has been working with, which has tens of trillions, allegedly, of additional money. But we, Stephanie, we have to find a way to deploy that money. That money is not giveaway, it's not concessionary, it's ready to invest. So countries bear a responsibility to also step up and make sure that they have the transparency and the contracting and the PPAs and the ability to be able to make those trillions into deployable investment, bankable money. In addition, we have to work with philanthropy. I talked to the Rockefeller Foundation last night. They're working with Jeff Bezos and with Mike Bloomberg and others who are putting in money in philanthropic structure that will then leverage tens of billions of more money that we can use to help de-risk, to help have blended finance. So there's going to need to be a really strong collaborative effort here between the world of high finance and the world of government decision-making that can actually deploy money so that we can build out the renewable energy base, transition out of coal, do the things we need to do on technology. 50% of the emissions we need to reduce in the next 10 years is going to come, I am told by scientists, from technologies that are not yet at scale. So everybody's going to have to be part of this race to zero. And really what Glasgow did, I thought, was rather brilliantly bring people together and begin fired the shot that begins the race of this decade. And we now have to report new NDCs next year if people are not up to par. We got the rule book for the marketplace rules locked down. We have the elimination of double counting. We have transparency rules defined. So I think a lot was done in Glasgow, thankfully, that actually makes real this next decade of action and decision making. And I hope everybody is going to bear down and help us deploy those trillions, because that is what it's going to take in order to win this fight.
But you know as well as I do that a lot of the money that's needed is needed in developing countries, and there's no commitment from those big financial institutions to take the money to where it's going to be really needed, and in no capacity necessarily, given that these investments would need de-risking. We discussed it in the session yesterday. But can I just ask, if you were Prime Minister Modi, we had a rather probably what you would consider a minimum commitment from India at the COP. But if you were Prime Minister of India, would you have said anything different? Have you been given any reason by the rest of the world to be more ambitious in your domestic target when you're also looking at a need to develop?
Let me tell you what we're doing. I understand Prime Minister Modi. I've met with him several times this year. We formed a partnership to help India be able to deploy its 450 gigawatts of renewable power. And we've agreed to bring finance and technology to the table. We will need India's governmental help to be able to make sure that the land is available, either lease or sale, that the transmission lines can move across one state to another. The discoms in India are going to have to reform, because not all the revenue is collected for the electricity that is provided. And obviously, this is a two-way street to some degree. But in addition to that, yeah, we have foreign assistance programs. We have the Development Finance Corporation, which will have several billions of dollars. It is already currently financing projects in less developed countries around the world. But the real fight here, folks, we got to be real about this. We have been a leading nation in consistently assisting other countries to develop. And in fact, whether it's AIDS in Africa and the PEPFAR program, which we did in a bipartisan way with George W. Bush and the U.S. Senate, back when I was in the Senate, we've always reached out. We're giving away vaccines now to the degree that we can. $1.5 billion, I think, are going out. So we are involved in helping less developed countries, and we will stay involved in doing that. But please focus on this. 20 countries equal 80% of all the emissions. They're basically your G20, though not exclusively. Those 20 countries bear the greatest responsibility for helping to solve this crisis right now. And the fact is that no country really accepted, ours included, that this was a genuine crisis until 1988, 1992, when we all went to Rio and formed the process by which we now meet every year for 26 years. But the truth is, a lot of countries decided to grow with coal, not with nuclear, not with gas, not with other alternatives. And coal is the primary culprit today in warming the planet and in polluting the air and in creating the intensity of the storms that comes with the increased moisture that rises from the oceans. And we have to start where the greatest amount of emissions are if we're going to win the battle. So if more than 50% of those 20 countries are now committed to a 1.5 degree track, and what we have to do is go to the countries where the greatest amount of emissions are and begin to reduce the greatest amount of emissions the fastest we can, as fast as we can. And that means China, Russia, India, Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, a group of countries, Indonesia, and those are the countries we've been doing climate diplomacy with. South Africa has accepted a new plan, but we have to, all of us, be able to put the deals together that will phase out their coal fast and provide the alternative renewable energy, and the other alternatives are going to be necessary to provide a holistic, virtual grid that works for the future. We're going to get some of that done with gas as a transitional fuel, gas turbines that will hopefully supplant some of these coal-fired plants. But we don't want to look at gas with its methane content and its emissions unless we have abatement. If it's abated, fully abated, then have at it. But we've got to reduce unabated coal, unabated fuel. And there's enough of that out there to present a major challenge today. The truth is that India, I think, has if India were to deploy the 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, then India is in compliance with 1.5 degrees. So this can happen. It'll take all of us working together. We have formed a partnership with India, with Prime Minister Modi, in order to bring the technology and finance to the table, and we are prepared to work with India, with other countries, to help deploy as fast as possible. But all of us are going to have to be part of decision-making. We could do better with certain countries building out much more renewable energy. And many of those countries could build out the renewable energy and then rely on a gas turbine for the base load guarantees and energy security that they need. That is something that's doable. We have high hopes, some of us, for a small modular nuclear reactor. That is being pursued. There are interesting possibilities that are happening now already in that sphere. In addition to that, I just heard today about new technology coming from a certain group in the United States that may be able to use CO2 in the burn process and then in the capture. That actually makes it easier to capture the CO2 and then do something with it. So I think we're already pushing the technology curve. If Saudi Arabia can actually deploy that massive solar field and then use the solar to drive the electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen and then pipe it across the Mediterranean into Greece and into Italy, those are real possibilities now. So we're looking at a global economic transformation, revolution, if you will. And I think new technologies are going to come along that are going to change this game, hopefully overnight, but certainly over the course of the next 10 years.
We've run out of time, but I had one final question, because you talked about the importance of US leadership here, which is clear. Commitment to this agenda didn't used to be a partisan issue in the US, but it sure is now. If you looked at the polls, if you look at the recent election results in Virginia and elsewhere, you would say the Democrats are overwhelming underdogs for next year's election and, at this point, for the next presidential election. Why should the rest of the world believe this leadership is going to continue beyond the next 2 or 3 years in this crucial period?
For the very simple reason that the marketplace is going there, whether the government does or not. This is going to be a global revolution. And I believe that transformation is going to be so far. Look, General Motors and Ford Motor Company have already announced they're going to only produce electric cars by 2035. By 2030, they're going to have 50% of their cars are going to be produced are electric. So I'm just telling you, you think they're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars retooling those plants for electric and then turn around because some politician comes in and wants to deny science again? No. What we're doing in the United States has nothing to do with politics and ideology. It has everything to do with mathematics and physics. And if you understand mathematics and physics and you believe the science, this is going to happen, because it's going to happen in all the rest of the world. And the United States is not stepping up to say, hey, we're the leader here. Everybody's got to be leaders here. Everybody's got to step in together. But we are here to make up for the deficit of a guy who didn't understand science and didn't have any economic rationale and who pulled out of the Paris Agreement and hurt the world in doing that. And we don't have any time for that. So we're going to come back. We're going to do everything in our power, because our citizens are as exposed as citizens everywhere else in the world. I just left the summit at the White House with President Lopez Obrador and Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau. And Prime Minister Trudeau talked about what's just happened in Vancouver. But what's happened in Vancouver is, you know, what's happening in Russia, where the infrastructure of their extractive economy is threatened because the permafrost is shifting, or the fires taking place in Siberia, or mudslides anywhere in the world, or fires anywhere in the world, or drought anywhere in the world. I mean, if leaders don't grab onto this baton, they're going to get thrown out, because the public understands what's happening and they're demanding action from all of us. So I believe no politician in 2024 is going to step up. And besides, it's way too premature to be making any speculations about, I can't believe what's going on. President Biden is going to pass his next piece of legislation. And together with his infrastructure bill, that's going to put about $2 trillion plus, much of which is going to go to climate action in the United States. And even while Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement, the vast majority, 37 governors in the United States, Republican and Democrat alike, continued to stay in the Paris Agreement. Over 1,000 mayors continued to stay in the Paris Agreement. And they, you know, as I say, America stayed in that agreement, and fully 90% of the new energy being brought online around the world today is online because of renewables. This is happening without government. It's happening because the marketplace has made a decision that's where we have to go. And with disclosure and trading mechanisms and pricing of carbon and CBAM coming at us, believe me, folks, no one politician can undo what is about to happen.
Well, that's an emphatic note on which to begin our final day of deliberations. John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be with you. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back to the stage Andrew Brown.
Thank you.
Nothing to do with ideology, everything to do with mathematics and physics. Welcome to Geopolitics Day. We're going to spend the next 3 hours looking at superpower competition and how that competition is playing out in various domains. Supply chains, technology, and capital markets. The conversation could hardly be more timely. We're just a few days away from COP26, where I think we saw the first tentative signs of US-China warming. And evidence of that was the agreement that John Kerry worked out with a man he called his good friend of 20 years, China's chief climate negotiator, Xie Zhanghua. And then, of course, on Monday, we had yet another virtual summit between Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. So a couple of housekeeping notes. We're going to power through this morning. We're not going to have a coffee break. So if you feel the need for a caffeine fix or anything else, feel free to wander out at any time. Of course, if you wander out, we would prefer that you wandered back. The other thing is that we want this whole session to be super interactive. So not just questions, we're also interested in what you have to say, in statements. No iPads today. Today is microphone. So if you have a question or you have a statement, please put up your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. I think that's it on housekeeping. So we're going to set the stage with a Bloomberg data presentation. What else? Tom Orlik is our chief economist, and Tom and his team have put together a data presentation looking at risks to global trade through two prisms, US-China competition, and also through climate. So let me hand you over to Tom.
China, carbon, the future of global trade. These are weighty